So today we're going to talk about the problem with Los Angeles rent control at the cost of, yes, possibly getting tomatoes thrown at my face. But anyway, when I say rent control, I'm referring to the City of Los Angeles Rent Stabilization Ordinance, which includes buildings built on or before October 1st, 1978, including multifamily apartments, duplexes, townhomes, and condominiums, but excluding typically, as of now, single-family homes. Now, there are two main parts to the rent stabilization ordinance. One, there is the rent control aspect, which puts a cap on how much a landlord can increase the rent. And two, there's what's called just cause, which means the landlord can't just get rid of a tenant unless there is just cause, or pretty much like legal reason to vacate the unit. And first, let's talk about the problem with the rent control part. Now, to a certain extent, yes, rent control has many benefits. I mean, it allows consumers to budget for a new car because they know the rent is not like all of a sudden gonna shoot up by like 100%. It can also stop landlords from abusively using rent hikes to kick a tenant out. And even from like a capitalistic point of view, it can also benefit employers because now they don't have to worry about their employees quitting because the rent went up by 100%. Now they have to move, and the commute from Riverside no longer makes sense. To which you may now be like, well, all of this actually sounds pretty amazing. Like, what's the problem? Well, here it is. So one, the annual allowable increase policy, which is typically about 3 to 4% per year, is flawed and creates unfair low rents for a selected number of people. So for example, in a 10-year period, let's suppose rents go up on average by 3% per year. Now, that doesn't mean that they went up every year by 3%. It could be that during the first 7 years, rents stayed flat and then skyrocketed by like 30% in the last 3 years. But the way the law is, if you didn't raise the rent during the first 7 years because the market didn't allow it, well, you can't go back and raise it now. Essentially, that tenant's rent is frozen in the past and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, this leads to problem number 2. Current rent control policy incentivizes tenants who would otherwise move out to not move out, which then creates a housing shortage, which then leads to unaffordable housing for everyone else. Yes, that's right. Rent control causes the same problem it's supposed to solve. For example, I used to live in a rent-controlled studio apartment in Venice Beach, about a block from the beach, and after like a year of living there, I finally met my next-door neighbor for the first time. And he's like, oh yeah, no, I don't really live here, but I got this place like 15 years ago, and because it's rent controlled, my rent is super cheap. So yeah, this is pretty much like my vacation beach house. And you can't really blame him. I mean, 10 more years and his monthly rent is gonna be cheaper than one night at the luxury hotel that's across the street. I mean, it's almost kind of like a good investment with like 0% down. But this is not an isolated incident. I mean, check this out. This building is right in front of the beach in Santa Monica with like these massive ocean views. Now, as a new tenant, someone moving into the community, a one-bedroom apartment here is going to cost you about $5,500 a month. But because the building is rent-controlled, check out how much some of the existing tenants are paying. All right, so here we have $5,500, pretty normal. $7,000, pretty normal. And then bam, $1,500, $1,200, $1,400, $1,400. And check this out, 1035 and 1036. These are neighbors, 2 bedrooms each. One is paying $1,400, the other one's paying $5,100. That's insane. $920. That's insane. And the thing is, almost 30% or about 150 units in this complex are below market value by 50% or more. I mean, when you're getting 50, 60, 80% discount on the rent, why would anyone ever leave? But if they did, let's just suppose if 30% of the units in this building all of a sudden became available, trust me, the rents in the building would dramatically come down. And this is just a small glimpse into a bigger issue that's affecting Los Angeles. Current rent control policy incentivizes people who would otherwise move out to not move out, and as a result, it creates a housing shortage, which then leads to higher prices for everyone else. I mean, it's supply and demand. And by the way, my name is Daniel Rangel, real estate agent on the west side of Los Angeles. If I can be of any help, it would be an honor. And for a free consultation on buying or selling, you can find my information in the description below. And also a big thank you to Chris Gray from Moss & Company Property Management for helping me with some of the research for this video. And problem number 3, harsh rent control measures and below market rents disincentivizes landlords from properly maintaining property, doing repairs, or even supplying housing. And rent control regulators know this. That's why rent control does not apply to new construction, because if it did, no one would ever build new housing. But this is also kind of messed up because it's the older housing that typically needs more repairs, maintenance, and updating, yet that's the type of housing and landlords that are having their revenue and income restricted. I mean, it's pretty much like rent control applies to poor landlords, but does not apply to rich landlords. But aside from this leading to like unfavorable living conditions for tenants, it can also lead to less appealing neighborhoods. I mean, if you have a property whose market rent is $5,000, but your tenant is paying $2,000 and there's nothing you can do about it, I mean, how motivated are you going to be to paint the exterior of the building, update the landscaping, or just make the property more attractive? And for a sample of what this can do to communities, I mean, just take a drive through Venice Beach, where next to like multi-million-dollar houses, you have old rent-controlled apartments that are falling apart because the landlords have no incentive to renovate them. So these are just 3 problems with rent control. It creates unfair below market rents for a selected few people, which then incentivizes these people to not move, which creates a housing shortage, which then leads to higher rents for new tenants, while at the same time disincentivizing landlords from reinvesting in their buildings or creating more housing. And look, I'm not saying we need to get rid of rent control. On the contrary, we want it. Rent control is good, but at the same time, no one should be paying 50 to 80% below market rent, especially when it's coming at the cost of affordable housing for everyone else. I mean, some of these tenants are getting the benefits of buying a house without buying a house. But now let's talk about the second component of the rent stabilization ordinance, just cause, which again means the landlord can't get rid of a tenant unless there is just cause, or pretty much like legal reason to vacate the unit. Now, I get why this exists, because without it, landlords would just be able to get rid of a tenant because the rent is too low, or pretty much for like any other reason. But here's the problem. 1, it applies to single-family homes and condos. Now, this didn't used to always be the case, but as of 2023, in the city of Los Angeles, just cause was pretty much extended to all properties, including single-family homes. And this is something that very often shocks my clients when I tell them, yes, if you rent out your house despite the lease ending or expiring, you cannot get rid of the tenant. To which they're like, then what's the point of like having a 1-year lease? Yeah, no, actually, no, it doesn't really matter. A lease expiring is not just cause to get rid of a tenant. Now, one of the very few exceptions to vacating the property is if you declare that you're going to move back into the property as your primary residence, at which point you would still owe relocation fees of between 1 month's rent and about $20,000. Now, for many clients, the thought of having their ownership rights restricted or losing access to their property, well, naturally scares them. And then they're like, no, that's cool. We just won't rent it out. And this is especially true for clients buying second homes, as it can be nearly impossible to regain access. Now, this brings me to problem number 2. Resale value. Now, let's say you got a new job in Alabama, so you rented out your house in Los Angeles for a year because you weren't sure if you would be coming back or not. You then realize you love Alabama and you want to buy a house there, but you got to sell your house in Los Angeles, but despite the lease expiring, the tenant doesn't want to leave and there's nothing you can do about it. And the thing is, no one wants to buy a single family house or a condo with a tenant. And if you do find a buyer, accounting for multiple factors, you could end up selling at a 20% loss. But this not only affects sellers, it also affects buyers, because in the eyes of a first-time home buyer, a house with a tenant is pretty much the same thing as zero inventory, because getting rid of a tenant, even if you have just cause, can take several months to a year. Meanwhile, you're still having to pay the mortgage on a house you can't even get access to. So yes, just cause can also mean lower inventory and as a result, higher prices for first-time home buyers. But anyway, on the topic of just cause, look, yes, I get the benefit of landlords not being able to kick a tenant out whenever they want or for like whatever reason, but I think there should be classifications. Large apartment complexes, corporate investors, landlords in the business of being landlords, yes, okay, just cause should apply. But duplexes, condos, and single-family homes that represent first and second homes should be exempt. I mean, these owners should be able to regain access to their properties once a lease expires. They should be able to sell without having to take a loss. And equally important, we need this inventory. Duplexes, condos, and single-family homes should also be available for first-time home buyers, because at the end of the day, affordable housing includes affordable home ownership. And if we don't allow people to have upward mobility through home ownership, we will be creating a bigger gap between the rich and the poor. Now, before I leave, since we're on the topic and the elections are coming up in November 2024, I just want to say consider voting no on California Proposition 33, because if it passes, it will bring tougher rent control laws to a city that's already suffocating under the current laws. It can mean stricter rent control laws for single-family homes and condos, which could lead to less desirable communities, less inventory, and higher prices for first-time home buyers. And in summary, again, look, I'm not saying let's get rid of rent control. On the contrary, we like rent control, but we should also not be expanding rent control. We should be fixing it. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Am I wrong? Put it in the comments below. And by the way, my name is Daniel Rangel, real estate agent on the west side of Los Angeles. If I can be of any help, it would be an honor. And for a free consultation on buying or selling, you can find my information in the description below. And also a big thank you to Chris Gray from Moss & Company Property Management for helping me with some of the research for this video. And you can also find their information in the description below.